Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. Karen, Queen of the Break Room. I used to work a crappy retail job in LA, and the boss had just hired a new assistant manager. Picture a blonde Karen who appears to be in her 40s, but tells everyone she's 33, who has just divorced from her Beverly Hills doctor or dentist husband and now has to actually work for the first time in her life to support herself and her 4 children. On her first week there, this super smart lady left her Louis Vuitton bag open on the break room table instead of locking it in her assigned locker, and someone stole $200 from her purse. Not saying it was her fault, it was definitely the thief's fault for taking something that didn't belong to them, but Karen's response to it was just stupid. Assistant Manager Karen then told us that as a new policy, no one could enter the break room without her permission, so that she would know who was going in there and when, so that if anything else was stolen, she'd have a clear culprit. I'm not sure how she intended to enforce this during the time she wasn't in the store, but maybe it didn't matter if other people besides her got stolen from. For reference, this was the first theft any of us had seen since being at the company. I don't think they ever caught whoever it was that stole from her because we were too cheap to have security cameras in our break room, which was an old single-room bathroom with the toilet ripped out and a table and lockers put in. But part of me really wouldn't be surprised if Karen had misplaced the $200 herself or had never had $200 to begin with. Well, we obviously didn't like Karen strutting into our workplace and trying to limit our access to our own break room, so cue malicious compliance. Every time our hands were sticky and we needed to wash them in the break room sink, we interrupted Karen. Every time we needed to take a drink of water, which we were only allowed to do in the break room, we interrupted Karen. Every time we had to throw something away but the trash can was in the break room, we interrupted Karen. Every time we needed to restock a product that had a box of it sitting in the break room, we interrupted Karen. Karen could barely get her own inventories and paperwork done because of how often we needed her permission to open the break room door. She ended up getting so frustrated that the new policy lasted about 3 days, and she quit soon after that. I now have a much better job that doesn't involve retail in the slightest. If you were working here, and Karen puts in this policy that you have to go to her to get into the break room, how do you comply with that? Do you just follow along with it until you and your coworkers break them? Or do you try to fight it somehow? Let me know in the comments below. It just has to roll? Got it. Back in 7th grade, we had an assignment where we had to make cars out of limited materials. The only items we were allowed to use were 6 inches of wire, unlimited printer paper, unlimited glue. The rules for the car were as follows. 1, they were going to be pushed down a ramp, so they had to be able to roll. No points would be taken off if it couldn't make it down to the bottom of the ramp, but the car that made it furthest would get bonus points. 2, they had to carry a pink eraser. 3, the eraser had to be able to be removed and placed back in, so you couldn't glue the eraser into the car or completely conceal the eraser. I went to a really small school and my parents got a jump start on my education at home, so I had always breezed through school and assumed this would be no different. My smart butt decided to wait until the night before it was due to start it. I had an idea of how I wanted to structure it and figured it would be easy enough to put together. Then I sat down with the materials and realized 6 inches of wire was not nearly as much as I thought it would be, and I had no backup plan. I took the assignment out to my dad, and to his credit, he was excited for the challenge and completely overlooked that I had gotten into this mess by being a lazy procrastinator. He called my older brother for ideas while I sat around folding paper in various ways and stared in dismay as I was faced with the prospect of my first ever consequences for procrastination. Until I realized something. The rule wasn't that it had to have wheels, the rule was that it had to roll. And the instructions said we could use the various materials, not that we had to. And technically, the teacher didn't actually define what she meant by car, so I got rid of the wire entirely, folded and wrapped several pieces of paper around a pink eraser and glued the paper to itself, then molded it with my hands until I could remove and replace the eraser without the overall structure collapsing. Basically, my car was just a paper tube held together with a little glue and hand sweat. My dad and brother, seeming rather deflated that the challenge was solved without them, admitted that I hadn't broken any rules here. And if I felt comfortable submitting a wad of paper for a grade, then they wouldn't stop me. So off I went to school the next day with my car stuffed in my jacket pocket. When I showed up, everyone had these carefully crafted, beautiful things with wheels. One guy had even made the entire car out of glue and was forward-thinking and patient enough to wait for it to dry. Truly impressive stuff. My friends asked if I forgot my car, and with a poop-eating grin, I said, "Nope," and whipped that dumb little tube out of my pocket. They stared in confusion, and one person said, "But it has to have wheels." I said, "Nuh-uh, it says it has to roll." I checked. Everyone looks upset as heck, rightfully so, that they had spent hours and days working on their projects, and I just strolled in with a freaking paper tube. One guy did burst into laughter and said that was brilliant, so that made me feel at least a little justified. My tube car barely made it halfway down the ramp, but the teacher had also said it didn't actually have to work well as long as it met all the criteria, which it did. I wound up getting the lowest grade in the class, at a 95%. Since it was a completion grade and everyone else followed the rules, they all got at least 100%, if not more, due to the bonus points. Teacher pulled me aside, trying not to laugh, and said she was giving me an A for following the instructions, but that I clearly put no real effort into my car compared to everyone else, and it wasn't fair to the other students to give me an equal grade to them. Floored I had gotten away with it, I accepted gladly, and I'm still a lazy procrastinator to this day. When OP procrastinates to the point where they have no other option but to do it at that point, it becomes a necessity. And necessity is the mother of invention, and OP invented a paper tube that technically fit the car restrictions. So they did just fine and got a great grade for it, for minimal effort. That's not what it means. My first job was working for a locally owned grocery store. It was a pretty good first job and most of the bosses weren't too bad. There was one I wasn't crazy about because he was a stickler and liked to micromanage. My job included stocking the shelves. We always had a routine when starting the day where we went through the aisles with a notepad, wrote down what was needed, and then we went to the back to load up a U-boat, those metal U-shaped frames, with the required products to fill the shelves. One day, a new rule was implemented. We were not allowed out on the floor without a U-boat. Clearly, the idea was to increase efficiency by taking note of what was needed while simultaneously putting products on the shelves. However, the issue was the unwavering wording that we always needed a U-boat while on the floor. As most know, there are very few situations where things work well as always and never. The time comes for my first shift with this new rule. I clock in and I'm ready to work. Wait, I need to have a U-boat if I'm out on the floor. But I don't know what I need on the floor without checking first. This seems like an issue. It would be a waste of time to load up an entire U-boat with product that I may discover is completely full on the shelves. So, me being a smart bud who doesn't enjoy following rules or norms that do not make sense, grabs an empty U-boat and drags it around the entire store with me while taking note of what products we need. Just as I'm heading to the bag with my U-boat, Supervisor Stiffly Stefferson walks up next to me and asks why my U-boat is empty. If I had loaded shelves, it would have had many empty boxes and plastic on it. I tell him very matter-of-factly, well, I had to see what we needed on the shelves, and the rule says I always need a U-boat with me if I'm on the floor. I am pretty positive I saw him trying to conceal a smirk as he informed me that that was not exactly what they meant by that rule. All it takes is for one smart butt and a rule that says you always have to do something to get a little bit of malicious compliance. The post office won't send parcels on their side. This happened to my boss earlier this week, and I was super impressed by her quick thinking. I hope you are too. I work at a shop that sells a specific artisan food item in the UK. We're still open during quarantine because part of the business is online, so we either deliver local packages personally or get a national courier service to send parcels overnight. While we have the courier service come collect parcels every day, sometimes it's cheaper to go through the post office if delivery is in some weird place like the Scottish Highlands or one of the Isles. Anyway, my boss goes over to the post office to deliver one of these parcels. It's a cardboard box, which is almost a perfect cube, except it's a few centimeters higher than it is wide. The address is written along the side. Once there, the postal worker gets one of those plastic boards with parcel-shaped holes in it to test where the parcel can fit, and therefore its size classification. Here's where things get weird. The postal worker classes the parcel way bigger than usual, doubling the postage price because it won't fit through the plastic cutout. My boss explains if the postal worker puts the parcel on its side, it fits perfectly. Apparently, that's not allowed. Postal workers couldn't possibly send the parcel on its side. If my boss wants to send it, she'll have to agree to pay the extra postage. End of discussion. Well, my boss has a trick up her sleeve, aka a Sharpie. She crosses out the address, flips the box on its side, and rewrites the address again, so the height of the box is now smaller than its width. The same box is now classed as a smaller size. We don't have to pay almost a tenner extra. May not be loads, but the pandemic hasn't exactly been great for business, and I get a fun story to tell on Reddit. Everyone wins. It's kind of frustrating that the rules are so stubborn on orientation like that, but it's good quick thinking on the boss's part to flip it over, sign it again with the address, and get the appropriate priced package sending. Boss's payroll cuts cost him a high repair bill. Boss is doing everything he can to cut payroll hours from my coffee kiosk. I have to handle the morning and afternoon rushes by myself. I open and close by myself. I've been telling my boss for weeks that I need double coverage so that I can step off the floor and get my managerial tasks done when needed. He doesn't believe any of my tasks will take long, so he refuses to give me more payroll. He forbids me from closing a little early, and I'm not allowed even a minute of overtime. Cue malicious compliance. I clock in and out right on the dot. I only have about 30 minutes to get any managerial tasks done at the end of the day, meaning I do not have time to do anything else. Well, one side of my bean hopper, the machine that grounds the beans for espresso shots, shorted out in the middle of the day. I know full well how to fix it, but since I'm solo, I can't work on it during the day and I don't have time after close. So I call in a repair guy and ask for a rushed ticket. The guy came in the very next day, spent literally 5 minutes fixing it, and then left. Cost the store $90. $90 one time is still cheaper than having another person there and spending, $50-$60 per day for a week, or every day that they work there anyways. Of course, this being said, that does not excuse that the boss is still a bad boss. Voting by proxy and Catholicism. This is a favorite story of my family, but I don't recall all the details. My great-uncle, James' fake name, was a priest in the Catholic Church. One day, his bishop was unable to attend a meeting about funding a mission to help the poor. There would be arguments and then a final vote. The bishop wanted to stop this mission, so the bishop decided to send James as his proxy. The bishop gives him specific instructions for the argument and even has James practice. James diligently attends the meeting. He explains to the other attendees that he is the bishop's proxy. He makes a convincing argument, as instructed, to stop this mission. Once all the arguments have been made, it's time for the vote. Now, the thing about James is that he dedicated his life to alleviating economic inequality. In the years following this incident, he founded a soup kitchen in his home city and also spent several years in Zimbabwe. The attendees go around the table, declaring either aye to continue the mission or nay to stop it. Everyone is shocked when James rings out with aye. After all, he had just argued for the opposite. James explains that the bishop told him to make the argument, but never actually told him which way to vote. The attendees have a good chuckle. When the bishop finds out, he is angry and completely unamused with, "But you never told me which way to vote." Because of this incident and several other incidents in defense of the poor, James never moves up in the Catholic political system. It's a little disheartening to hear this story about how this bishop is so against a mission to help the poor, and that OP's great uncle defending the poor causes them to never move up at all in the political system. But I guess that just goes to show you how rough politics can be. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite of the day and why? Let me know which story and why in the comments below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.